Hello, 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 wonderful friends. Guess what? It's not Monday when we normally have our Pink Pixels. In fact, we are having a special stream today, Friday evening. Here we are. It's a wild weekend. We're wrapping up and making sure that we have the opportunity to actually have some fun. This week has been wild. It's been hectic. I'm sure everyone's been checking more emails than they wanted to check, going to more meetings than they had planned on attending. And now that we're finally in our evening, we get to make sure that we make time for us, that we get to do the things that we want to do, that we love to do, then spend time with people that we want to spend time with. Hello, 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 Real. Thank you for joining us here in chat. I'm excited that we're kind of changing things up. I know Monday is kind of a nice night where we get our inspiration and we take it on throughout the week, but this is the perfect bookend where we come back at the end of the week. We get to reflect what we did, how we approach things. And that's such an important part. So much we're just moving forward. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And we get stuck on that treadmill. And this Friday evening, right? We get to be here. We get to speak soon to the amazing Erin. We get to have a chance to kind of reflect, recognize our strengths, recognize where we're at and where we want to go. And that will help drive the next step that we take. I'm so excited. I know one meeting is too many. Okay, fair. I see your commentary. In chat. Well, meetings are adjourned. Tonight, we're hanging out with friends. So if you would all be ever so kind to help my newest friend join us for tonight's episode of Pink Pixels, please help me welcome Erin Lydon. Hello.
Thank you, back. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. I haven't been on Twitch in a long time, so this is great. But welcome. I'm so happy to see everyone from your community, from influenceHERs and here for Pink Pixels. I am Erin Lydon, as Beck said. I am the president of Poker Power. And if you have not heard of Poker Power, it's probably not what you think. We have a women's empowerment company where we teach women how to play the game. And it's the game of poker, but it's really the game of life. And so it's all about taking the skills and the strategies of gameplay, honing them at the table, and then transcending from the poker table to the real world. And that's every part of the real world. Whatever you are looking for, whatever you think is success, however you want to accelerate your life or your career, learning how to think and strategize and take risk like a winning poker player can help you get there. So I'm super excited to tell you more about Poker Power, our journey, how we can get you as part of our community and going along on a poker journey with us, and certainly taking questions and answering anything you'd like to know about poker.
I love that. This is so exciting. Poker Power is, first of all, a great name, right? Already it is assertive, it's clear, we know what we're here for. How did you even land on a name like that? Because I know, in naming a few businesses of my own, choosing a name feels like it's a pressure, it's a gift you're giving yourself of the future you envision with it.
Yeah, and I didn't name this company. Our founder named it Poker Power. But what's really important to remember is that in the very beginning, our name was spelled poker and then POWHER. And we had that name for over a year. And what we realized is that one of the most important tenets of Poker Power, one of the reasons that we exist, is to be inclusive, to be accessible, to be a very welcoming community. And because we target women, we target what we call Women Plus. So that's really anyone who identifies as being a woman, trans, non-binary, all are welcome in our community. And we felt that HER as a pronoun at the end of our name actually might exclude someone who would want to feel like they belonged with us. So we took that out. We are just regular Poker Power, the way you would think to spell. It also gets misspelled less in searches, so that's good. And we have had the name that you see behind me, and our brand has looked like this for quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love the name change and working to become more inclusive. Because I remember looking at, you're right, I think we'd read somewhere poker is not exactly very representative of the population, who we actually see sitting at the table these days. It's not us. Oftentimes.
No, it's no one who looks like you and me, and probably most of your community. I will tell you that in the casino space, and we live outside of the casino space, but we are certainly very well integrated into the poker world. About 5% of the professional players are women. So it's one of the most male-dominated industries, today.
Yeah.
And it has been this way historically. It is moving in little percentages, not even a full percentage. Sometimes we go from 4.5 to 5 and we get really excited. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Being a professional poker player is a challenging path to choose, whether, you're male, female, whatever your gender is. That's a tough life to pursue. But as a woman, it's even tougher. We can get into more of that. But what we really are trying to do is translate sort of that exclusiveness of being a poker player to how women feel in the workplace. Because we know that there's this force field around the real poker table, but there's also a force field in the classroom. There's a force field all the way into the boardroom. There's a force field when you're having an interview, when you're trying to get a job promotion. All of those force fields is what we're trying to break through with poker.
I really like that language. Like, it's a force field instead. And this is kind of a reflective of the metaphors that have been evolving throughout the years for women. Like, we've seen the glass ceiling, the moving ladder, and the force field. Why do you visualize it in that way? Like, that it is this field now that surrounds this thing we want to get into.
Well, that's a really fantastic question, because I don't know how many of your viewers have been in a poker room or walked by a poker room, but even the physical space of poker feels unwelcoming. It feels like you can't cross through the barrier, because what is happening in that space is so uncertain for most of us. And what I'm really speaking about is, you don't know the language, so you don't know the jargon of the game. You probably don't know the rules of the game and just the mechanics of play, because poker is a complex game, and how you touch your chips and how you move your cards and where you sit, all of that matters. And if you mess it up, it's really, really apparent to everyone else at the table that you don't know what you're doing. And so you're just giving away the biggest tell of all, is that I don't know how to play. So here, take my chips from me. And so that force field that keeps women from, competing, from playing, from really having a seat, if they choose to do so, that's what we want to break through by making poker welcoming, making it fun. I always say that there is a reason why guys play poker on Thursday nights. And it's because, yes, it's poker, and yes, they're down in the basement and they're having a great time, but it's also networking, and it's friendship building, and it's where decisions are getting made. And so often women aren't in that flow of information where the decisions are getting made. They're not even being thought of. So that's another reason to break through that barrier and that force field of poker.
I like that. It's a very much so repellent in the actual space itself. Like, even once you're there, you're like, I feel very aware that I am not supposed to be here.
Well, and then you look around the room, and you most likely will be the only woman sitting at a table of 8 or 9 other players. The only. And you stand out. You just do. There's no way to hide that. And you can take that, you can play that as your advantage. And as you get more comfortable with the game, but you are always going to feel like the outlier. And so there's lots of ways that women poker players, thrive in this game. There are some very incredible women that play poker professionally. We have 2 of them on our board. We have Jennifer Shahade, who's both a poker player, but she's also a chess champion. And then we have the very well-known Xuan Liu, who's also one of our advisors. So, and there are many, many other women that have succeeded in this game. But it takes tremendous courage and resilience to do so.
I love that you note that, because when I think of almost any other space where you're like, I'm new, I'm trying to learn things, there's a lot more dialogue that can happen. And if, like, I'm learning how to play a Dungeons and Dragons game, or I'm trying to figure out soccer, right? There's a lot of, like, let me help you out. Here's some drills we can go through. But if I were to go in, and like, oh, I'm new, suddenly it's not like, let me help you out, I am now the new prey, right? Like, but I've seen that same kind of feeling in meetings. Like, when I have to go present for the C-suite for the very first time, I'm like, suddenly like, oh, I am very aware that if I do something wrong, like touching the chips, right? Or like I dress in a way that looks different from everyone else, I'm like, I'm going to be the one that they recognize that is new, and they're going to read all the rest of my actions through the lens that I don't belong here.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And that really comes to the intimidation piece of poker. It truly is an intimidating game for the things that we just spoke about. But even once you do take your seat, you make a lot of mistakes, not just mechanical mistakes, but actual play mistakes. You cannot become an expert poker player overnight. It takes years, if not a lifetime, to really build the skills of this game. And so you're constantly evolving your gameplay, your knowledge, the way you're going to interact with the other players at the table. That's also the workplace. We don't start out, most of us, almost all of us, at age 22, and know how to maneuver in a boardroom. Like
Uh-huh.
it takes a long time to build that confidence
Mhm.
and the confidence that will help you get there.
Mhm. Yes. And that's the hard part is like having the space where you can build the confidence. That there's that running what the trackway, the leadway for like an airplane before they get to take off. Like it's nice to be able to have that leadway, whereas many times it feels like, well, this is your chance, sink or swim, and like that's not how we learn. Not most of us very effectively. Like for me, I was not the person who just jumped in the pool. Like I'm the small steps. Let me figure out one thing first, and then I'll figure out the other thing. But in this with poker power, you work on that creating the space where you can learn, where you can ask questions. Tell me a little bit about this educational process because I think that's something that people are very interested in, especially in not just sitting down at a table because this is also done in a variety of settings to teach, right?
Right, right. Yes. And let me go back in time just a little bit
Oh
because
yeah.
we are a pandemic success story. We were
Hmm.
literally launched during the pandemic. And prior to that, we were teaching high school girls in person,
Hmm.
very traditional poker. It looked like poker, smelled like poker,
Yep.
but it was all women and all girls. The lockdown came,
Hmm.
and of course, we all didn't know how to cope. We really didn't know what to do by moving our lives onto a screen. And certainly in the workplace, that was a very foreign way to conduct business and progress your career across a screen.
Hmm.
What we were able to figure out very quickly is that if we could make poker welcoming and accessible and understandable, and it felt like a community, that it was okay to have faults and make mistakes and ask those dumb questions that we all have when we're learning something,
Hmm.
then women would be more likely to start to join us. So our timing, I always say our timing was a perfect storm because the world shut down. We all
Yes.
had to become, very, very adept at living in screens. And we also had time. We had time to
Mm.
take up something new. And poker takes time to learn. And so
Mhm.
you could come and join for a 4-week session where you were meeting with us once a week for 60 minutes. And you were getting a poker tutorial from one of our instructors. And then you were playing in a poker app. And so you were with a community, you were asking questions in chat, and then you were playing in the app where you could continue to communicate with the instructor and the other players. And
Mm.
so we really broke down those barriers around how do I learn this game? Because if I walk into a casino, I don't know what to do. No one's going to teach me there.
Yes.
And I want to do it in a place where I feel I can make the mistakes. And women's communities tend to feel that way for many of us. It feels safe.
Mhm.
And we have worked very, very hard to continue that initial way that we built the community, even though now we do lots and lots in person.
Yeah.
It should always feel like we are teaching and we are working with the person who gets it the least. Like I always say at our live events, I want the person who is the most hesitant to sit down and play this game to leave feeling absolutely the best. And then I know
Mm.
we've been successful because everyone else is having a good time.
Yeah.
But if we can get that one who wasn't sure she belonged there, and
Mhm.
after, 90 minutes, she's loving this game, then I know she's going to come back and keep learning.
Mhm. I love that because what you're talking about is transformation, right? A lot of organizations like it's transactional. We give you a service, you get something out of it, and we're done. But you're really working to see a change in not just what they get, but the attitude, the confidence, right? Those are harder to deliver with on every time. How do you create an environment, right? This community that is open because focusing just on women, right, is great. How do you continue within that subgroup to say, let's have this communication, especially online? Sometimes
Mhm.
it's easier to be like, I'm just not going to turn my mic on, right? I'm not going to say anything until I'm
Oh, yeah.
asked for it.
Yeah. So there's a few ways.
Mhm.
Our classes are very hands-on.
Mm.
And so whether you're learning with us in a corporate setting and there might be, 50 or 100 of you in a class at a time, or you're learning in our more public classes that are geared to the general public and anyone can enroll in them,
Mhm.
you are going to be interacting with a teacher. And at as soon as everyone comes into our classroom at the beginning of a class, one of the first things we say is, please turn on your cameras. It's much more fun to play poker if we can see your
Yeah.
poker face. And it's remarkable that about 90% of the people then click on their cameras because it is true.
Yeah.
And I can detect things over a screen. So will you as you start to learn the game. You
Mhm.
may not be able to see, my full body language, but you're seeing probably the most important parts.
Yes.
And so we really do encourage the interactions. We
Mhm.
also pause a lot to make sure and ask a question like, are you following? Does everyone understand? When you're learning poker, you have to have have a lot of repetition. One, you have to learn the jargon. So, the basic words of fold and call and raise and check. What do all those words mean? What are the actions associated with those? But then secondly, you're always thinking about not just the two cards that you have in your hand, but what are the possibilities at the table? What could someone else have? Because when you play poker, unlike any other casino game, you are playing the other players. You're not playing the house. So because you are playing other human beings across a screen or across a table, people act unpredictably. And that's actually what makes poker so fantastic and such a great strategy game, is you don't know exactly how they're going to behave in every situation. And in fact, one of the things that pro players have said to me, and I now finally understand because I've been playing for 4 years, is the most difficult player to play is the true beginner. The very first time they sit down, because they do so many crazy things. They play
This
cards.
Is the one thing I got going for me right now.
Right? Crazy things. They're like, why are you playing a 2-7? Why are you doing that?
Wild card. I thought that was good, so that's why my tells are,
Yeah. But in the beginning, all of those things happen in our classes. And it is so important that no one feels like they're being called out or they're being singled out for, asking that question or making that mistake. I mean, I will tell you, and I'm really good at math. I'm a finance person. I worked on Wall Street. It shouldn't be that difficult for me, but there were parts of the curriculum that I was struggling with. And I had never, ever played poker. I'd never even dreamed of playing poker. So my first class was with Poker Power with one of our top instructors. Her name is Tammy. And the patience that she showed week after week after week, because I do think that, it was just very hard for me to conceptualize the gameplay, which is really funny to me now, because now I sit down and I can actually be on my phone and I can still follow the action and I can have a conversation. So I have progressed, which makes me feel really good.
Congrats.
But yeah, we are always teaching to the person who is struggling the most. It's really important to it being inclusive.
I love that. It's very relational too on this end. And when you talk about Tammy, for example, how interested they are, like they're invested, they talk, they recognize, they see where each person's at. I really love the human component, because a lot of online teaching now is very much automated. All right, like people are like, let's go to ChatGPT, tell me how to play poker, right? And you answer like Texas Hold'em, like, right, so real, that's one of your favorite games out there. Yes. But it's not really reactive or seeing where you uniquely are in that process. Having a guide, having that mentor, your Gandalf, if you will, certainly helps that process, I imagine, so much more. Even as you had mentioned, like, so there are some parts of the curriculum you just get stuck, right? So you're just like, what is this supposed to mean? And it's helpful for someone who can recognize that.
Yeah. And also can adjust to different learning styles. I think when we're learning games, some people are very visual. Some people are much more tactile, or they need to read, they want to read the instructions. They want to read the definitions and what the rules are. When you have a live experience, a teacher can be very adaptable to the learning styles. But that's not to say that we don't love everything that we're doing online, because we did end up building a poker app. We needed to build a poker app. And so
you have a lot of individuals going through the program now too. It's grown significantly.
We do. We have tens of thousands. We've actually taught more women how to play poker than any organization on the planet. And we're really proud of that. Yeah. And we did it very quickly, with some challenging circumstances. But largely that came, we very early on in the pandemic, we started to partner with corporations. And the real trigger reason for that was because as the world shut down, suddenly every company across the globe was trying to find a compelling reason for their employees to turn on their screens and interact with each other. And it's hard to remember this now because we do it so easily, but there really was that first year in 2020 where people just did not want to be having the dialogue across the screen. It felt so foreign to us. But all these companies had budget. All of them were looking for ways to bring cohorts of people together, for a fun experience, for a way to, kind of cheer us up in some of those darker days. And Poker Power landed right smack in the middle of that. And we were very quick to pivot and start to work with these corporations. our very first corporate client was Morningstar, and I am forever grateful for Morningstar because one, they took a big risk, and two, not only did they start with us virtually, but they have now continued with us. They have really bought in to the inclusion of thinking like a poker player is part of their culture, and those are the very best clients, because once you start to have cohort after cohort go through this program, people start to use poker jargon in the workplace. They start to make references to, oh, that's like that hand I had. You're all speaking this language that you all now understand. And it is actually very empowering to be able to do that.
Well, and that's part of it, right? Once you start integrating in the language, that's that's creating a shared vision of how we communicate, that we understand the perspective in which somebody else is coming from. And that's key for collaboration. It's key for cohesion, especially for a large company that's trying to make sure everyone works together, that we're being efficient. And so I imagine that's a huge benefit that they've noticed by continuing this relationship with Poker Power.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I think, working with financial firms, that was a really quick lift for us, an easy lift for us to do. But we now work with tech firms, we work with insurance firms, we work with a lot of law firms. I will say that of all the industry types that we work with, it is the lawyers who get poker the quickest. And I think the way their brains are wired to be so analytical, and to be very good risk assessors, it makes them very good poker players. So I always say, be warned if you're sitting at a table with a person who's also a lawyer. Because they're out to get your chips for sure.
They're ready for this. All right.
They are
live,
ready.
eat, and die by this.
Yeah.
But that's the great intensity around it, that you're working to help give everyone else that same kind of edge. Right. That just because short lawyers, if it feels a little bit more apparent in their industry and in their space where they have to be so much more front facing, those still same skills, as you've mentioned, right? They go across every industry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
On the website, I noticed you all have some beautiful testimonials
Mm.
just from so many individuals who have come through your program and how it's impacted them. And not, I mean, those quotations are not from those like, I became a professional poker player, but it's reflecting how it impacted them personally and professionally to continue to develop and bring the vision and goals that they had. I'm curious, are there particular stories that you feel connected to? Like when you hear it and you're like, yes, that's what we're trying to do. This is the kind of outcomes, the stories that we want to continue to see month after month, year after year.
Yeah, I'll share a couple of them because I try very hard to stay close to the community, and obviously as we've grown, I no longer know everybody's name. For a long time, I was at every class, every session, and really participating because it really mattered in those early days to get all that feedback, to actually see it in action and what was working and what wasn't. But one of the things that is probably very endearing to me is when a woman goes through our curriculum and then she has not only a professional or sort of a confidence booster that happens, but she also has a monetary booster that happens. And you're right, very, very few women who learn with us are actually going to end up in casinos, in any significant way. That is not the mission.
I mean, for fun, sure, why not?
For fun, yes. But the woman I was speaking of, she was going through a divorce. And she made the decision to go through the Poker Power curriculum as she was getting divorced and not tell her soon-to-be ex that she was learning how to play poker. And she credits Poker Power with changing how she and her lawyer negotiated her settlement and moved her out of that marriage in a way that benefited her tremendously. And she really said, I would not have had that outcome had I not learned about position and power and how to play my chips and how to bluff. She says all those things I was practicing at the poker table. So I think that one's very fulfilling to us. Another one is a woman in LA who is a commercial real estate broker, and I'm not terribly familiar with commercial real estate, but the way it's been explained to me is that it's very much who you know and sort of where the relationships are. And many industries are like that, of course, but to even be able to bid on a job, you really have to put yourself out there.
Oh,
and so
that
she
sounds
had not
stressful already.
it sounds really hard. And she had not felt that she was at a level within her industry that she could do that. She goes through the poker power classes, and then she wrote to us and she said that she had the courage now to be aggressive. One of the things we focus on a lot when we're teaching poker is how to play aggressively, and the word aggressive being a very positive thing, because aggressive poker players win the chips. And it takes practice to be comfortable being aggressive at a poker table. She worked on that. She then told us that she had gone and she had bid on a very big job and she had won it. And she was over the moon. And we were over the moon for her that, it happened, that she could credit back to poker, that she had the confidence and the confidence now to, compete with the big boys, literally.
I love that. And I also love the excitement around this because, I don't know, typically when you win at a poker table, you're the only one who celebrates because nobody else at the table won. So it's we're excited for you because we are happy. But it's one of the
I've never thought of it that way.
That's the other reason to have the community. You'll have other people who actually will celebrate your wins with you. But that's important. I also want to tap on, because I think it's really fascinating, on the language of aggressive. So I used to debate. I enjoyed it. Debate coach, all that fun stuff. But especially as a woman, being called aggressive was never a good thing. And it was also often accompanied by other foul language or unkind messaging to say, you just shouldn't be this way. It's unpleasant. You're not going to win votes. You're not going to win any arguments by being aggressive, right? And I mean, the underlining message was always it's a sexist take when my male counterparts could stand up there and scream and pound the table as much as they want, And so this is fascinating to me that you're reclaiming this kind of women can be aggressive, but how does that often play out as they take it outside of this space, right? Because it's one thing yes, we have this talk. We understand that it is important not just to be assertive, but we can be aggressive for the goals and what we want and what we need in these spaces. But how do they continue to hold up to that value when they face other individuals who aren't open to that?
Yeah, no, and exactly the way that you described the way that the word aggressive has been gendered is really, really tough for women, because it puts us into the bucket of being unlikable, being bitchy, being pushy, all really terrible words, particularly in a workplace setting. That is not how you want to be thought of.
You're not going to get promoted that way,
You're not getting promoted. Unlikable people don't get promoted. You're absolutely right. And having a loud voice, having an ability to talk over people, having an ability to take the ideas of someone else. These are stereotypically male characteristics in the workplace. And they happen, they're microaggressions that happen to all of us typically as we're going through our careers. And one of the things that we're helping women do is to first find their voice, because so often we shut down. And I speak from personal experience, and I've had a very successful career in male-dominated industries, and there have been many, many times where I have just made myself small. And we don't want to be small. We want to be really strong, and we want to be really, really brave at the table. And I think because if you sort of reflect back on our culture, you reflect back on how boys and girls are often raised differently, and it starts at a very young age. But if we just start on the playground, boys are, we're on the swings, we're on the slide. Boys are kicking the balls. They're punching each other. They're chasing each other. They're deciding who's the biggest, who's the fastest, who is the dominant one. Girls don't interact in that way. Very rarely when we're young do we interact in that way. And if we do try to insert ourselves into that type of play, we're not allowed. We're immediately shut down. It can even be our own parents that shut us down. It's not the way little girls behave. Be nice, be polite, don't upset anybody.
Or if we get hurt, then it's our fault too. You shouldn't have been in that space.
Right.
You knew they were bigger than you. What were you doing?
No, but when little boys, go and have to have their stitches, on their forehead, it's like a badge of honor because they got into something. That I can't change all of that institutional bias. I can't change, all of the ways that culturally we get raised. So when I get someone at Poker Power, they're usually somewhere between the ages of 20 and 40. So, they've kind of come preloaded. They have a lot of their own beliefs and the ways, the ways they're going to interact. What we can do is put them outside of their comfort zone. And it's a really interesting strategy that we have, is that we don't let you hide. Because you will have a tendency at the poker table to just want to fold, fold, fold. It's the safest possible move. Nothing's at risk. No one's questioning your gameplay. You just got really bad cards for like 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
Okay, happens. It really does. But you're not on the hot seat. That's not the way we teach. We want you on the hot seat. We want you not only to play and make mistakes, but when you play, I want you to bet 3 times the big blind. And what that means for a non-poker player is that you're putting a lot of chips into the middle of that pot. And what you're saying is there's a whole lot of value behind my decisions. I believe in myself so strongly that I'm going to shove these chips to the center of the table. That is not an action that we get practice doing. I mean, it's as simple as that. So you do that. You do that in all of our games, whether it's virtual or it's in person, and you have success. And I think that is the critical moment at Poker Power that translates most quickly to the real world. So first you get this huge boost of confidence because you won the pot. You did it right.
Yeah, you're like, success.
But secondly, you have done something 20 minutes ago you never could imagine yourself doing.
Yeah.
And you did it. And everyone at the table is cheering for you. They're really, really happy for you. And now you want to do it again. And I really do think it's, hitting repeat on that moment again and again.
Yes.
That is what makes us more comfortable doing it in the real world.
Normalizing the behavior. When you were describing that whole scene of like going and like, I was already feeling the anxiety in my chest, like just start to seize up a little bit. I'm like, that sounds stressful. Unless it's a sure thing in my brain. I'm like, unless it's a sure thing. But then when I was thinking that sure thing, like when you're talking about like, that reminds me of the same thing. Like when I'm putting in my application for my resume for different jobs, I don't put that in unless I know like I hit everything. It has to be like a sure thing. Like I'm not going to risk anything. Even though it's like what they say no, right? Like, but in my brain, I'm like, unless I hit everything and I'm sure that I have a legitimate chance at this, like pretty much there, then I don't apply. And I think, how many times have I cut myself out because I'm assuming because I don't hit everything that everyone else must already be better.
So I'm sure you're aware of the study that was done that said that men will apply if they meet 6 out of 10 of the criteria. We are 9 or 10. Just flat out, we are not putting ourselves out there and taking that risk. But secondly, what then tends to happen is that even if we get ourselves into that position of having that interview or that opportunity, we're underselling ourselves. We are not very good at being outspoken about our accomplishments. And I think, it's a really tough thing to use the word I a lot because most people are like, everything's a we, it's a team. And you're absolutely right. Like Poker Power would not exist without the most incredible team that we have and our teachers. Absolutely. But if I am going to get a promotion, if I am going to go and get a raise, I have to use the word I have to be accountable for what I have contributed and what I have done. And playing poker is a singular activity. You do it as an individual. You do it against lots of people, but all the decisions are you. You don't play it as a partner game. You're playing it as yourself. And I think that is a really good experience for women to have, is the outcome of this game is because of the decisions and how you played your cards. Just you.
I love that, right? That process of decision making. And you, of course, obviously connections with chess as well, as you see in your own, but the ability to assess the variables and to recognize the people, the different things that can come into play, right? There's an approach to that just the awareness, but being able to weigh it and understand your spot at this very volatile environment, this platform, this space that it is, that can be intimidating all on itself too, besides just the language of it, knowing how to play, getting into the space for the first time. That can be very difficult. And I know you all also focus on doing a lot of effort of like, how do we look at all of these things? How do we strategize?
So one of the very first things that we teach once we get through the jargon and the rules is position. And hopefully that goes pretty quickly. 52 decks, 52 cards in a deck is where we start.
Yes, love that.
The positions at the table, and what I mean by that, because that sounds like sort of a weird thing to say, is that every seat at a poker table is either a position of strength or a position of weakness. And so when you sit down, whether you're virtually sitting down in an app or you're actually at a live table, you take your seat and you are already assigned the strength of that position. So what's great in poker is that with every round of play, the positions move. So if you happen to have sat down in the worst seat, you're not going to stay there, for the entire game. But for that first hand, you are there. Why this is so important is part of the way that you make a very complex decision and also make it very quickly in poker is knowing not just what your two hole cards are they strong, are they weak? Not just knowing the size of your chip stack in comparison to everybody else. So, how much of a bully can you be at this table? But thirdly, it's, am I sitting in a position of strength and weakness? And in poker, if you are in the position of strength, which is the dealer seat, you get to see everybody else act first. And many of your listeners will understand why that's valuable, because you don't have to make your decision with your cards until everyone else is playing. So you're gaining the most information at that table. There's actually information asymmetry in poker with every single round of play. So you're going to make you can have the identical hole cards. You could have, let's say, a king and a 10. And the way that you're going to play that, if you're first to act versus last to act, is different based off your position. That translates to the real world all day long in negotiation.
Yeah.
When you think about negotiating, are you in a position of strength or weakness? It evolves. Sometimes it flips if it's a long negotiation. But if it's pretty quick, maybe you're buying a car, are you strength or are you weakness? And you always want to be evaluating that piece of it as part of your strategy and how you're going to negotiate. Again, we need practice at this. Like, this isn't intuitive. I don't think it's intuitive. I think you really need to practice, and you need to be helped to think through different strategies and why they work. And what's great with gameplay is that you see the outcome. You see, did my decision actually result in winning the pot?
And I like that, right? Like, because there's a quicker turnaround in being confirmed of the decisions you've made. And that's important as we're trying to relearn, carve new pathways to say, this is how I do things. Because it's hard, especially because, you started off with high schoolers, but as more women, that we've been in our careers, we've been in our lives for a while. We're older than some of us want to, we get stuck in certain ways. And so learning it isn't just like, now I know this path, but we have to tear up the old pathways that we've taken, because especially in professional conversations, those don't go slowly. We can't be like, let me pause this. Let me go recharge for 30 minutes and I'm going to come back and I'm going to have a plan. Like, we're in the middle of this conversation now, which means I need to be adaptable and I need to know how I want to carry myself in this moment. And that's difficult. Do you find, especially that you've gotten the chance to sit through so many of the classes, that tends to be one of the initial struggles that people experience in this program?
Yeah. And we have a solve for it, of course. I can solve any problem with poker, I promise you. But one of the solves is a move in poker called checking. And so you might be familiar with it's the tapping on the table, or you can say the word check. You actually never have to speak in a poker game. Everything can be done by movements. But checking is pausing action. And yes, it's a moment, it's a minute or two that you're pausing the action. But the reason that strategy is so critical is it is putting the brakes on. You don't have to put more chips into the pot right now. You check the action to the next player and you get to see what they do. Now, if they decide to bet, the action's coming back to you, and to stay in the hand, you're going to have to put chips into the pot. But that could buy you 30 seconds. It could buy you 3 minutes of time to really try to think through, because what you're always doing at a poker table is you're thinking about what you have, but you also have to be thinking about everybody else at this table. And if it's a full table, that's 8 or 9 people that you're trying to keep track of their style of play. And, do they bet big? Do they bet loose? How do they manage their chip stacks? And so using checking as a very much a strategic part of your gameplay is really helpful. Same thing. What I always say to women, because I primarily speak to women, is that sometimes you get an email from your boss, or let's say not even a Slack. So they're expecting a more immediate answer. So it's a Slack from your boss, and you either don't know the answer, you're uncertain of the answer, or you really don't want to give that answer right now.
Yeah.
You want to go and do something, and then you want to give the answer. The move for all of those is check. You don't have to respond to every single input that comes into your life immediately. And I think as women, we are so eager to know everything that we can and to come across as the expert and come across as highly confident, which we are, but we can check and we can say, I'm going to get back to you in half an hour. Or you actually don't even have to respond. You know, in this virtual world, so many of us work remotely. I don't know. I didn't see that one yet, you know, and I was going to buy myself some time. But I really think it's a change in behavior that you don't have to be on immediately every time someone has asked you a question.
I think that's also a really interesting commentary of whose time we value more. Like the fact that we'll drop whatever we're doing or our comfort level to accommodate and make sure that we answer as quickly for that person and their needs before, well, let me finish this. I'll check Slack when I'm ready to, or I'll come back and I'll answer that when I have gotten, I've done what I needed to do in that process. Like we're reorganizing ourselves and putting ourselves back into the picture instead of as support to others.
Yeah, so many of us like to be pleasers. It's part of our personality. We get validated by being a pleaser, and part of that pleasing action is those quick responses and trying to problem solve. The other thing that we often see in our classes, and I if this had only happened once, I wouldn't think it was a trend, but it's definitely a trend. I have to remember, we work with women from intern all the way to the C-suite. So and the ones that are, most senior, they've done a lot of right things in their career. They've made a lot of really good decisions to get to where they are. What I hear again and again is the night before their poker power class, they're on YouTube and they're trying to teach themselves poker. Now they know they are coming.
Can't be embarrassed.
Poker. It's a poker 101. Like it is poker 101. It is for the newbie, the novice. We expect nothing.
And then they're like, but I got to study for this.
But I got to study. And that is so fascinating to me, as we all know we have very limited me time as it is. And you are so trepidatious about coming to this class with all these other women who don't know how to play. The only people who know how to play are the teachers, trust me. And they're going to be really nice to you.
Yeah.
And you go and you spend a couple hours on YouTube so that you can teach yourself this incredibly complex game, which you're actually not going to understand after watching YouTube for an hour.
Yeah.
That's a female characteristic, and we have to break that.
Wow.
That is a waste of our time. Because we do the same. We write an email and then we don't send it, and we read it 10 times and we tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
Just
save it in drafts just to review.
Send the email. Yeah. Ask for what you don't think you're going to get. Now, that is my big one, is asking for, certainly what you deserve. I think we deserve a lot. But we're also going to hear a lot of no's. And the only way you get comfortable with hearing no, which is like losing a poker hand, is you got to put yourself out there and make the ask.
Yes. That's a hard part. I won't like getting used to hearing no, because I think the other part of that story is, one, getting used to it, right? Like normalizing it, but also understanding what are the consequences that come from no, because I think I am afraid to hear no, because I think the consequences are way worse than they actually are. I've got a great imagination,
Yeah, I always say that no just means not now. It doesn't mean never. And if you can put that perspective around it, is, okay, I'm hearing no, I need to dig into that. I need to understand what needs to change to get it to a yes. But it's a soft no. It's just not now, not yet. And the not yet could be because the economy is really bad and we're not doing raises and promotions this year. Or it could be, we gave you a stretched assignment and you got 2 out of the 3 and we need you to get 3 out of 3. Like there can be some very concrete answers that you gather. But what we tend to do, and I've done this myself, is you hear no and you turn and you go. You're gone.
Yes.
You don't want to continue the dialogue. You've been
I've heard enough. Thank you. Goodbye.
I've heard exactly that.
Yes.
And in poker, because I'm sorry, but I make everything related to poker.
As we should.
As I should, yes. Is that, you lose more hands than you win in poker. And if you don't take the time to learn by either asking or doing your own study to understand why you made the mistakes, you keep making the mistakes. So there is this self-awareness component to the game that I really do think is so important in the rest of our lives. We all make, it took me a long time to realize this, but we all make so many mistakes so many times. And that's actually one of the things I love about a startup. Like a startup by definition is allowed to screw up. It's what we're supposed to be doing, because nobody, you don't know what you're doing. You're a startup, figure it out. And so you try 10 things and one of them works. I've actually found that to be really sort of invigorating, certainly, to lead a company that you can make mistakes at, and it's okay.
That is nice, right? That's it. Again, it's changing how we see this game, right? It's changing the perspective and how we can play within it. And I think being a startup is really great. And of course, Poker Power, as you guys have been going through this, what were some of the mistakes that you're like, I'm so glad we learned this? Because I think sometimes we look at mistakes like, why? But that's part of growing. And you're going to hit different things at certain times. Like it made sense at the time, but now we got to change. What was something that you're like,
Yeah.
this was an important part of our evolution of where we are now?
Yeah. Where my mind goes immediately, and we have made many, many. So this could be a whole entire podcast, could be just be on mistakes. But this one was a costly one. And it was also, we thought we had the right solution. So with poker, one of the things that we learned pretty early on by being virtual is that we would set a class for 4 o'clock on Thursdays. And 4 o'clock on Thursdays works for this many people. Most people, 4 o'clock on Thursdays just isn't going to work in their lives. And so we were feeling frustrated. Like, why are women RCPing, paying for a class, but they're not actually showing up at the class? And we did survey after survey. And what we determined, no matter how we asked the question and who they were, what their demographic was, where they lived in the world, it was, something got in the way, life got in the way, kids got in the way, job got in the way. I forgot, just didn't work because it was 4 o'clock on Thursdays. And so the solve, particularly when, you are really a tech company at your heart, is, okay, technology can help us solve this. We have to create a way to engage in Poker Power that is always on, 24/7 learning on demand. So at 11 o'clock on Friday night and you're in your jammies, you want to take a poker lesson, you can do that with us.
The
So we did that.
flexibility there, right?
The flexibility of it. And I also think that's very, the trend in learning is that on demand. Like, I want to learn when I want to learn, and I don't want to have to be signed up for a class. Even though poker's really fun to play with real humans, there's a lot of enjoyment you can get by learning, on your own time. So we created a video series that was filmed, and it was. I think our curriculum is really good, but in retrospect, I think it was really dull when we filmed it and pushed it out to the world. And we do not have a large marketing budget at Poker Power. And so we don't do a lot of paid spend, but we did put paid ads behind pushing out this video series of how to learn poker at 11 o'clock at night in your jammies, because that's what you want to do. And it had a series of engaging quizzes that you would work through to continue the progression. 52 women in the entire world clicked.
Cool. It's a start. It is a start.
It's a failure. It's a total failure. But the idea wasn't the failure. The idea was not at all the failure. The execution of it and the timing and who we targeted in the ads. Like, there's a million ways we could have cut and sliced that differently and maybe had more success. But when we walk away from that, that was one of the failures that we had. It didn't make us say, oh, okay, we don't want to have a virtual learning on demand component. No, we know we want that. We know that is how we're going to scale. But we delivered it in the wrong way. So it's now delivered in our app, and our app is highly engaging. It has little bite-sized modules that take you less than 5 minutes, so you don't have to watch a talking head on a video screen. And you can literally do it, in line picking up pizza. You can go through one module, get home 3 hours later, and do module number 2 if you want to. And you can come back and repeat them. So it's very adaptable and flexible to the learning styles of most people. We've had great engagement with that. That is one of the most popular things in our app. It isn't actually the gameplay. It's learn. People want to learn.
But that makes sense, right? And like pacing it out and finding like, how do we make this consumable? How do we make this that it fits to them instead of following traditional learning models where we have a person speak for 30 minutes and then you have to figure out how to apply it, right?
And I think because poker is played with chips and cards, even if you're playing in an app, you are maneuvering pieces, around the table by how you tap on the screen. It's highly visual. And you have to practice that. Like, at least most learners I know, they can't just absorb the words and the explanation. They actually have to push the chips in, or they have to, push raise and then make the decision, well, how much do I raise, and click on that and see the outcome of that. So, another thing that I think is an important learning that we had is in the early days, we've always had women poker experts as our instructors. We care a lot about teaching proper poker. It's very, even though our, 95% of our community are total newbies, I want to make sure that when you're learning poker, you're learning exactly the right kind of poker in the right way. So we care a lot about the sort of the credibility of the curriculum, but we overemphasize the learning part and underemphasize the playing part. And so as we have evolved over the last few years, we now know that and actually one of the ways we really learned is once we went back to doing in person and we could see things clicking and we could see
the
how
part
when
where
you're
they were enjoying and engaging.
You can see when you're giving the talking or at the front of the stage and you kind of see the eyes glass over, you're like, oh, I gotta go faster. I gotta get off the stage. They just want to play.
Yes.
And so now we really emphasize the play. So play as you learn as you play, with the interactive feedback from the teachers. And so that's been another sort of learning for us, but I really think it's made the Poker Power experience such a more positive and impactful way to translate the skills, because you do so much gameplay with us now. And it's in the gameplay. That's when you're asking the questions. That's when it sinks in.
When you're actually in there, like I remember reading the list of the terms and when I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z behaviors. But now that I'm in it, suddenly when I'm trying to pay attention to everything else, my mind is blinking. That's when the questions always appear. That's where like, wait a minute.
I will say, I mean, even class 3 and class 4, we are still many of our students will say, "What's the difference between call and raise?" And that's okay.
Yeah.
You that is perfectly okay because these are foreign words. It is truly learning a foreign language. But by continuing to say it and tap on it, you are going to learn.
Now, typically, how long does it take for most individuals, on average, to kind of graduate, if you will?
I have never been asked that question. So I'll say a couple things. I say, you can come and sit with us for one time. And I am confident at the end of that experience, you can then go play in a charity poker game and you are not going to be the first one to bust out. And that matters. Yes. You do not want to be the first person that gets kicked off the table. Now, are you a poker player? Are you sophisticated? Can you manage, a lot of different scenarios? Absolutely not.
Right.
But are you familiar enough with the mechanics and the rules of gameplay that you can credibly sit at a charity event? Absolutely. And you should, because there's a lot of great dialogue and, deals get done at those charity events. And we all, women, we should be in those seats too.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, networking, right? It's a chance to build relationships.
Yep. That is what it is. Now, to actually start to advance your skills, we have a series of 12 lessons, and they're broken out into groups of 4. So 4, 4, and 4. It's basics, intermediate, and advanced lessons. And what we find is if you will contribute, if you will commit your time to learn those first 4 lessons, which is 4 hours of learning, in every hour you have half an hour of gameplay, you will have a knowledge of poker that many recreational players do not have. So when you think about, your spouse or your brother or your uncle going down in the basement and they're playing poker, most of those guys have never studied the game. They've never really thought about the strategy of the game and the most advantageous way to play in certain scenarios. And because at Poker Power, we like to give you just a few things to remember. Yeah. Like we give you 3 categories of cards to play when you start with us. Hold everything else. Now, a good poker player is going to laugh at that. Well, that you got to play a wider range than that. Well, of course you do. But on day 1, you don't. And if you do follow our strategy, you're not going to be first to bust. And having that confidence, we have learned how critical that is, because if you are first to bust, you might not sit back down again. So I need you to play successfully long enough that you want to keep learning.
I think that's so real in a lot of things. Like even in the video games I play when I'm with others, I'm like, just don't let me be the first to die, right? Like let me do that, and then I'll feel comfortable. And that's, I mean, it's a silly thing, right? Because there's a ton of variables that are in play there, right? But it's that first entry point that allows us to confirm that we can be here. Not even can, maybe should. I should be a little more bolder with that.
Should. Absolutely should. No, I can. I'll tell you one quick story about playing, because as I mentioned, I learned with Poker Power. So I didn't actually get to play live until it was mid 2021 when we could get back in person a bit. And I was in Vegas, probably not the smartest place to start for your first time. And I played very successfully, and I could tell that story later. So I won. I literally won, which is a total beginner's luck. And I had Schwan Liu, who is this very famous professional player, and Amanda Botfeld, also a professional player. They were both behind me, writing down my hands so we could debrief afterwards. So I was under tremendous stress. But it was a successful story. So I came out of that experience kind of thinking I was hot shit. Honestly, I wasn't, but I kind of thought I was.
Sure.
And so I went a few weeks later to my home casino that I had never stepped foot in,
Mm-hmm.
sat down at a poker table where the buy-in was $300, which is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one table. It's a small casino. There's only one table playing, but
Yeah.
there's 6 or 7 guys at that table. And in my very first hand, I see that I'm on the possibility of having a full house, which is a strong hand. It's not the strongest hand poker, but it's a good hand.
Yeah.
And I had won hugely with a full house a few weeks previous. So I was a bit biased to thinking about this full house. So I'm so embarrassed to say this out loud. So I literally hadn't sat down at the table for more than 30 seconds
Mm-hmm.
and I shoved all in. So I took that whole $300 in chips, shoved it to the center of the table, like, I am so badass.
I've got this as a repeat.
What I didn't realize, because I wasn't thinking, because I was all caught up in my own head and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't being perceptive at this table, is that across the table from me was a man who also had a full house. And at the end of that hand, his full house was higher than mine, which means he won the entire pot. Now, what happened next took me immediately back to being in 6th grade.
Yes.
And probably like at, middle school.
Yeah.
I had no more chips, which means I'm out of play. And I don't have another $300 to go and play again. Never would have. That would just been so mortifying. But I also didn't want to get up. I was so embarrassed that I was just trying to shrink into that seat as best as I could. It was one of the most awkward moments of my entire life, is that I felt I looked completely foolish.
Yeah.
And thank goodness I wasn't wearing swag that said poker power, because that just would have made it even worse.
Nothing.
The learning that came out of that, and that's why I always say it's so good to keep making these horrible mistakes that we all make, is now when I sit at a live table with people I don't know, unless I have pocket aces, which means 2 aces in my hand, which is the very best starting hand in poker, unless I have that hand, I fold for 20 to 30 minutes. And I just fold and I fold and I fold. And the reason I do that is that I want to assess the table. I want to take the time to develop an opinion about all the other players, because the giveaway that I missed at that table, that live table where I lost, is that the dealer knew the names of the guys at the table. And if the dealer knows your name, it means you're there all the time. Yeah. So you're not a newbie. You belong at that table. You probably know how to play poker. And I missed it. And I missed it because I was so aggressive in pushing all those chips in, because I was believing that, I was going to win again, and I didn't.
Well, you were playing a game of one against no one else in your brain, right? Like you were paying attention, like on my own, I've got a good hand.
I got it. Yeah. So, it is those hard lessons in life and at the poker table that certainly help us advance our game, whatever that game may be.
Well, and I appreciate you kind of walking us through that, because we've all been in that spot where we want to shrink. We're like, we know we're intelligent individuals. We know certain things. And there are just moments where we get caught up or we overlook something and then we realize it. And it's like, we get upset or we get frustrated or we get embarrassed. And that's probably the hardest emotions to come back from. Like getting angry at something, I can come back any day from being angry, right? Like not a problem. But the frustration and disappointment in myself.
Yeah. And particularly doing something that I, was already scared to do. Yes. Like I was already out of my zone of expertise and comfort. So good for me for sitting down again, bad for me for not, because trust me, in our lessons, we teach all this, and I was a terrible student that night.
But that's the thing is, though, too, because that's not where you ended the story. The story ends is where you look back and you go, here's what I should have done. Here's the things that I should have listened to. So that way, when you do go back to another table, whichever table you want to go to, like I've learned from this. And that's the important thing, because we're going to all have moments where we forget again. Those mistakes, like I hate it. I'm looking forward to, all right, what's my next embarrassing moment that I'm going to put myself through? It's going to happen though, right? We're human. It's how we handle that.
That's exactly right. You got it back. Yep.
I'm so excited. We're going to take a hot break right here, because I want to give us a little bit of water. It's 8 p.m. for us. We'll take a 5-minute break, but I love the discussion and the honesty that we're having about what we experience, where we want to continue to grow, and how we see ourselves in these these spaces, right? Of how we want to exist, how we want to change things for ourselves and others. So Erin, you're absolutely amazing. Thank you. Friends, we're going to be back in 5 minutes. We're going to take a small little break. Don't go anywhere. Okay, friends, we are back this wonderful evening. I hope you all got a chance to drink some water, stand up and stretch a little bit because we're sitting back down at the table with Erin this evening as we continue our conversations about poker power. So, Erin, I want to talk about when you went through this curriculum. Right? What were some, before you even sat down and started learning, what were some things that you were like, I'm excited about or I'm hesitant about? What did you bring to this table?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you have to understand that I had never played poker, honestly. But I had spent part of my career on Wall Street where I was surrounded by poker. And I never, certainly was never invited to sit, but I also didn't have the courage to go and ask to take that seat. And I had grown up throughout my, life. And at that time, this isn't very long ago. So, I am not young anymore. So most of my life, I have had a negative stereotype of the game. And I think it's a very common stereotype that some people have, which is that, it's a boys' club. It's booze and betting and a lot of smoke. And it's a really unwelcoming space for women. It's not a place I would want to spend any time. And because I wasn't familiar with the game, I knew none of the strategy of it or the positive things that you could learn from playing the game. I just kind of lived in my, negative stereotypes of it. So when I was asked to be involved with Poker Power, the very first thing I said is, well, I think Poker Power is a really stupid idea.
At least you were honest. You're like, let me tell you my approach right now.
Yeah, let me tell you why. But from my perspective, it was like like women don't play this game. That is the one thing I was certain of. I had never seen a woman poker player. Now I have come, of course, to love this game, and I play this game a lot. I play it in our app. I certainly play it anytime I have an opportunity to play, live. And I learn through our classes. But in that learning experience, and remember, this is during the pandemic, so everything is happening virtually, and we're a little clunky in the beginning, like anyone would be. Right. I was first very afraid to make mistakes. Part of that reason is I was running the company, but I was an absolute novice at this game. And the women who are teaching me are very, very talented, and they don't know me. So we're coming together for the very first time at a poker table, and I am sure I should actually ask them now because many of them are good friends. What did you think in the beginning? Because you had this woman who is basically telling you what to do every day. Which I really don't. I'm not that kind of leader. But I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about the game. I kept that a secret to our community, certainly. And certainly when I was on a corporate pitch call, I was not admitting that I didn't know how to play the game for over a year. Wow. And it was because I had imposter syndrome. I wasn't really sure I belonged. Like I knew I could run a company. I knew I could do the finances of the company. I knew I could hire. I knew I could build a team. Like I have all those skill sets, but the core product, which was poker, I was just ignorant of. What I have now learned, and now I tell everybody I didn't know how to play. It's easier to do once you do know how to play, because I can credibly play this game now.
Yeah, but, you're like, I've learned now.
I understand what someone who's day one with us feels like. I understand all of it. I understand they're scared. I understand they're excited. I understand they're afraid to talk. I understand they're afraid to, go big at the table. I understand they want to ask the third question for the third time that they've already asked 3 times. It's like, I get all that.
Just to confirm, right? Like, am I understanding this? Yes.
Yes. I have, all of those things have happened to me, which is why in so many ways now I can say, thank goodness that I was helping to lead this company and make strategic decisions for it. Because had it been someone who wasn't unfamiliar with the game, I think we would be in a totally different place. It really took that ignorance, that innocence, that confusion that I had to be able to ask the questions that made our curriculum stronger. Like in the very beginning, our curriculum was very good, but it was way too complex. And the reason we knew it was too complex is people were asking the same question over and over and over, which tells you like we're throwing years and years of poker knowledge at people. Yeah. We can't do it.
It's too much. We're drowning.
It's too much. It's too much. Yeah. And for what we need, if we were trying to create professional poker players, that would matter. Yeah. But I am the beginning of your journey. That is all I ever want to be. I want you to be excited about the game. I want you to play enough of the game that you can start to really use these skills and strategies in your real life. And what you do next with that that's probably not even going to be with Poker Power. I want you to always play with us, but if you actually want to, become a professional player, you're not ending your journey with us. We know that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I like that you're recognizing where they are and like, here's just where we need to get to be. Instead of like, okay, we got to be professional players, right? Like that's a huge goal. That's much further down. It's here's what we need to know at this stage. Great. Once we have that, then we move into the intermediate, right? Like it's pacing things out of what information is necessary at this. And that's such an important learning process for us, no matter what we're learning, because we want to, especially if we're uncomfortable with the idea, right? We just want to get it over with. And so we're trying to speed through and it's not sticking for whatever reason that can exasperate the stress and the anxiety and it slows down the process even more. And I think you're absolutely right to have someone like you as president, right? That you have this perspective of, oh, this is what they've gone through. This is the experience of how we need to make sure we're speaking and we're addressing and we're creating a space that continues to confirm, hey, you can ask questions. Hey, this is where you're supposed to be right now. Yes, that's okay if you don't know that. That's important to continue to build all the way through. And I love, so the app continues to provide that whenever, outside of even just the opportunity to connect with their actual mentors in that process.
And I mean, we've scaled pretty significantly. So of course we've built the team, and the team is a really interesting mix now because yes, we have these incredible instructors who are very good at the game. And very importantly, they're very good at explaining and teaching the game. It's not every good poker player is the right person to teach the game.
Yeah, those are two different skills.
Those are two very different skill sets. But secondly, we have a lot of people on our team now that learn poker with us. Like part of becoming, someone at Poker Power is you are going to learn how to play this game. And so, our head of product really didn't have a lot of familiar with the game. She'd played a bit, but she was not a poker player. And again, I think she's bringing that same new perspective to what we're building for products and saying, well, okay, if we know our customer base is going to be the beginner, then we always have to look at our app through the eyes of a beginner. We have to look at our curriculum through the eyes of the beginner. So I do think it's this really interesting mix of very good poker players. Our head of education, of course, is an exceptionally good poker player. Her name's AJ Rudolph. Have to have that.
Yes.
But just as importantly, is many other people on the team are learning as we build it.
I love that. Well, it keeps everyone part of the process. And I'm so glad you're like where we begin on that because, and you've mentioned this several times before, that you teach to the most inexperienced person. That's such a smart take because if you don't begin on the first step, every subsequent step after that is a mess, right? Like I'm one off from everything else. And as we continue to like start to diverge, it just gets further and further apart. So beginning in that initial part is so key. It's so key in that. Can we get into a few of the fundamentals? Mind if we talk a little bit like actually about poker and the game itself? So even go for
it.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, go.
So even like, so I'm going to be confessing a little bit about how little I know. And there's like general awareness that I have. Even before we started recording any of this, we had mentioned like, well, what kind of games? And I've seen like, Texas Hold'em, blackjack. I'm like, I know it. I'm like, oh, blackjack. But before that, if you had just said like, do you know poker? In my brain, I'm only thinking there's one kind of poker. And like, I only assume it's like maybe visually I'm thinking Texas Hold'em, I think.
The one you see on TV.
Yeah. I'm like the one I see on TV, like, oh yeah, I know blackjack, right? I'm just trying to get to 21. But if you mention any other types, I'm like, I'm probably heard of it. No idea. And I would not have categorized it initially as poker, So like what kind of poker games are typically played at a table? If we're going to start pretty fundamental.
No. So at Poker Power, we teach no limit Texas Hold'em. And that is our full curriculum from day one all the way to, however classes you go through. And we have just tapped the beginning of no limit Texas Hold'em. But there are many other variants of poker. And so words you may hear like PLO, which is pot limit Omaha. Really funny names. Like everything in poker has a fun name to it. You might hear about horse or mixed game strategies, which are all playing with cards, all playing with chips, all have some fundamental poker rules around them, but different ways to win, different number of cards that get played, different strength and weaknesses. We started with No Limit Texas Hold'em because that is the most common strategy,
Mhm.
the most common variant of poker that is played. That is the most familiar to people. So if you sit down,
Mhm.
in a poker room, that's probably what's being played. There will be other tables that have these other games at them,
Yeah.
but the majority will be Texas Hold'em.
Okay.
And we also we're not trying to create, poker players that are professional.
Yeah.
We're taking one game that we know has so much nuance and
Mhm.
strategy that we can just layer and layer and layer.
Mhm.
With the sole mission is taking this gameplay and putting it into the real world. So
Mhm.
I don't need to teach you 10 ways to play poker.
Okay, good.
Let's just focus on this one. And
That's smart.
that's really good for all of us. But the other thing to remember is that from day one, I've always said that poker power is Switzerland. And what I mean by that is that there are so many other companies within the poker industry
Mhm.
that teach all those other things, all those other ways to play. But even more importantly, they are taking someone who knows the basics of the game and they're taking them to a higher level.
Mhm.
So they're offering different ways to enhance your game, to study the game.
Sure.
You can truly devote your entire life to learning the game.
Mhm.
I knew from day one we did not want to compete in that space. We
Yeah.
are not credible in that space, and that's not the demographic we wanted.
Mhm.
We want the woman who doesn't think she wants to sit down with us, who
Mhm.
never has sat down at the table.
Mhm.
That's our mission. And because we have stayed very true to that, we're not trying to grow outside of what our space is.
Right.
We're the ones that do it best, and
Mhm.
we are known within the industry as, if you have someone who identifies as woman plus and she wants to learn poker, she's coming to Poker Power.
Mhm.
And I'm very grateful for the other companies in the industry and the other organizations. There's quite a few women's organizations in poker. They talk about Poker Power as the place that you start. And we take a lot of pride from that. And then we're giving them off to you.
Yeah.
When they come into the casino, they're yours.
Mhm.
When they come take your advanced study sessions, they're yours.
Yeah. Yes. There's a process, but you're right there because that was a gap for so many spaces. Like those kind of programs, they've been around for a while. Like you've seen them, and more are also adapting to be online, not geographically located. So it's friendlier, it's more accessible, but it's that barrier of entry of like I don't even know how many cards I'm supposed to have in my hand. Like that's the first part that stops so many people saying like, yeah, let me just sign up for that class. And I love that you're like, we know the audience, the questions, the feelings, the emotions that they're going through, and we can work with them there. Let's get them up to that first step. That's such a smart approach in recognizing, hey, here's where we fit into this big puzzle.
When we teach, whether it's in our app, and as I mentioned, we have our own apps called Poker Power Play that we built,
Sure.
but also when we teach in person, when we start with the cards face up.
Mhm.
Now, what happens when you start with the cards face up is everyone has all the information. So it's the opposite of what poker is.
Okay.
But the reason we do that is that we know we're teaching mechanics, we're teaching the rules of the game with the cards up. We're also getting women comfortable with the decision-making process because they're going to hear 5, 6, 7 other people talk before they talk.
Yeah.
And as you know, we all learn from listening to other people make a mistake and
Yes.
getting corrected. So it's a really
Mm.
interactive way to learn that's low risk, because when you start playing poker, you're already scared. So if we start with the cards face down, we're dealing, let's go.
Yeah.
It's a fail. It's an absolute fail. So we
Mhm.
have to baby step you into this. We have to, so sometimes we play face up 2 times, sometimes it's 4 times. It's really dependent on who is sitting at that table. And our teachers are talented enough that they're very adaptable. They can sense if someone's not getting it. They also, they know what cards should be played. And when the cards don't get played, they're able to say, okay, she's not understanding,
Yeah.
how this all works. And she can pause the play and she can really make sure that one person in particular is following along. All of that was strategic. Like, that is not the typical way that most people would teach poker.
Yeah.
But we knew that we wanted to make sure no one felt they were left behind or couldn't ask the questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But again, we're the beginners. We are truly your first day in poker. That's who we are.
I like that there's a willingness to say, especially like where there might be some people who are snobby about poker, like, well, that's not how you should teach it, or there's more options than that. And it's smart. Again, like every time I feel like everything you're doing, like, this is smart, this is well thought out. But the idea is you recognize it's not what other people think. And there's a lot of people who are good who cannot teach. And you're recognizing, no, that's not what we need to do. Yes, we're going to do things different. Yes, this is not traditional. We're not trying to do traditional. If we stick with traditional, things won't change.
There's 5% of women who play poker,
Yeah.
so it is not working.
Yeah. If we just
Traditional's
stick
not
with the
working.
same tactics, it turns
Mhm.
out we're going to be in the exact same spot
Yeah.
that we were before. So it's really good to continue to evolve. And one of the things, of course, with the app that you added to this process was like, yes, let's make an app available so that way we can teach in a different format that becomes accessible on a new way. What was it like of
Mhm.
saying like, let's launch an app? Let's figure out how we want to put this in an app, right? That's a whole new beast in and of itself. One, to just create one, and then two, to make sure like this is going to respond to the needs of our players.
Yes. So I will tell you, and Jenny, who's our founder,
Mm-hmm.
and me, and then AJ,
Mm-hmm.
who's really our lead poker expert's been here since day one. None of us knew how difficult it is to build a poker app. Building a poker app is not like building any other app you have ever thought of. And the reason for that is there's a lot of reasons, but one of the key reasons is something called edge cases. And edge cases occur in poker because you have humans making those erratic decisions that I already told you about. They also bluff. It's very hard to program for bluffing.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 6 people, you have 8 people, you have 2 people. Every single hand can have a different number of people and a different number of permutations to how those cards are going to get played.
Mm-hmm.
We had to build for all of that. We had to solve all of that behind the scenes in our poker engine.
Yeah.
Now, that was not me. That was definitely not me. So
Yeah.
we worked with an incredible partner. It's called Pineapple. And they have been with us for over 2 years, literally hand holding us through building this app. We're very proud of the app now. It's beautiful. Number one, it looks like us. It does not look like your typical poker app. It's video enabled. It's audio enabled because it was important to us that it feels real, that you could have communication across the screen. But it's also very intuitive. The way that you tap on things makes sense. And I'm assuming you don't have poker apps on your phone, but I have had every single poker app in the marketplace has been on my phone at one point or another, so I could play on them and figure out all the things that were difficult.
Yes.
One of the things that's difficult is actually the movement. Some of the apps are trying to replicate the movement of pushing your chips in. So with your finger, you have to swipe on the app.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard movement to get down correctly. And if you do it wrong, you end up folding. It's very hard. So
I was like,
we
that's the opposite of what I wanted to do.
It's the opposite of what you're trying to do. Exactly. So we really had to think about, we have people in our app who have never played this game. And that actually is a really good thing because they didn't have preconceived notions on how it should operate. So we get to start with a clean slate. So what is the most intuitive way to turn your cards over? What is the most intuitive way to make your bet? So it's, and you always say, well, it's like an iPhone. Well, it is like an iPhone because iPhones do it really, really well. But it's a tapping motion. It's not a sweeping motion.
Yes.
Information continues to come at you because, there's a lot to process at a poker table. But one of the things that we like, our players to see is how good is your hand. So when you're looking at our app, right below your cards, you're going to see what you've made. So do you have a pair? Do you have a high card? Do you have a flush? All of that's going to tell you. So it's teaching as you're playing. Okay. And again, that's really important. We don't play for any real money in anything that we do. So there's no edge being given away by, having that sort of information. Because our whole intent is to make this feel accessible and welcoming and doable.
Yes.
Poker should feel doable.
Yes, very much so. I imagine, like, as you're transforming, because I even love when you said this app, it looks like us. That you are now in these steps from the way it looks, how you're teaching. We're going to see some changes in the professional poker space and in poker in general. Like when I go to Las Vegas, I'd like to see more people sitting at the table that look like women, right? Or when we do watch like the big charity games that go on, like who's sitting there, who's partaking, how long do they stay in, right? To see that representation. Do you imagine that there are going to be other, besides just seeing more women at the table, other changes to the poker space because of how Poker Power is revolutionizing how you engage and teach?
We very much consider ourselves, a thought leader within the industry on how to do it differently, but we do that in partnership with a number of other really important organizations. So I don't at all want to say we know how to do this or solve for this, sure. But in conjunction with, the Women's Poker Association, they're a very close partner of ours. One of the things we know is really challenging for women in poker is what's called bankroll. And it truly just means how much money do you have? How much money do you have to play with?
Yeah.
And what we know this in real life too, is, women are paid less, women invest less,
Yeah.
women have less in retirement. Like the word less, less, less basically follows us our entire lives.
Yay.
It comes to the poker table too, is that if you only have the $300 in your pocket that I had that night,
Yes.
you can't play a lot of poker.
Yeah.
And so the cost to play, literally the buy-in cost that you have to play to sit at that table is prohibitive for many, many women. So when you think about the poker, you think about poker, you probably think about the World Series of Poker. You think of, all the lights, all those tables, it's in Vegas, it's the one you see on TV.
Yep.
The buy-in for that event is $10,000. $10,000.
I don't think I realized that. I'm sorry.
Now you may end up
In this
winning
economy,
12 million. But you have to have $10,000 to play in that event.
Okay.
Now, and I don't really care whether you're a woman who's just in the beginning of her career or at the end of her career. When women spend $10,000, they're making a trade-off. It doesn't matter how wealthy or poor you are. You are giving up something else. And often for women, we're giving up, something for our children, something for our family, something for our charity. Like we are always doing those trade-offs in how we spend our me money. And spending $10,000 at a poker table is a really hard thing for most women to do, which is why only 5% of the women's, only 5% of the players sitting there are women.
Yeah.
They're not doing it. So one that solves, and the industry, very much the World Poker Tour and Poker Stars, they're very supportive of this, is having lower buy-in events. There should be a way for women to benefit from this game and not put $10,000 on the line. So put 110 on the line. Put 300 on the line, put 1,000 on the line. And so those lower buy-in events really help. The other thing that happens a lot in the poker world is that you have something called satellites. And satellites are poker games that if you are the winner, you get a ticket into that big event. So that's a very common way of being able to play into bigger events without actually having to pay for the buy-in. We need more of those that women feel they can participate in. The last thing I'll say about the industry, because it's an important one, is that many of us have children. And when you play poker, you are typically going to sit at the table. If you're decent, you're going to sit at that table, not for a couple hours. You're going to sit there for 8, 10, 12 hours. You're going to go home and you're going to come back the next day and do it all over again. And if you're a very good player, you're going to do it for days. There's no childcare in Vegas. Let's just put that. There is not. You've not seen that right outside of the poker room. Oh, it's a nursery. That doesn't exist. But think about that from the ability of a woman to leave her work, if she's really not a full-time poker player, leave her family, spend a significant amount of money, and do that in a way that she would do it repetitively. Like you might do that as a bucket list.
Yes.
You're not doing that in a repetitive fashion.
Like the one time you saved up, it's retirement or, one of a celebratory, so that way people don't also judge.
Yep.
Because that's also part of it. Like you're listing like all of these variables of like, because we see that also in the workplace. Like why some women don't move up in it. And it's because they can't do the extra hours because they have to pick up their children after school, or paying for a babysitter is going to be much more expensive, or there's not, because right now daycares are really hard to get your kids into because there's not enough of them, right? There's a lot of reasons why there can be barriers of entry. And then on top of it, there can be social judgments around it as well, right? Like, as you mentioned, like there's opportunity of where we're choosing to spend our money. And if it's not going towards our kids or the charities that we support, it's like for fun, you're spending 10,000 for you for fun.
Yeah. And at the same time, our sons who are 14 go off to summer camp, and that's where they learn to play poker for quarters. The imbalance is remarkable. Teaching a young girl to play poker sounds like that doesn't sound right. You have to agree with that. That doesn't sound right. We're teaching young girls. That was the origin story of Poker Power, is that our founder's daughter played poorly in a tennis match. And her dad literally walked through the kitchen and said to Jenny, well, Juliet should learn to play poker. And what happened is that Jenny said, why does that sound so weird? Because she has 3 older boys who all play poker. They just seem to, by osmosis, boys just learn to play poker. Why does it sound so weird to say Juliet's going to play poker? And then that's really, and that was the start of everything, is why does this sound weird? Why shouldn't she play? And let's get this going. Let's get her and some friends and some mom friends and try this.
When does it become the Girl Scout badge, right?
Oh my gosh, I know. We've already thought of that.
That would be brilliant. We're ready for it. We're ready for it.
But again, until we can reframe the game as one of strategy and skill building, you literally stack your skills through poker, skills that are going to help you in your career.
Yeah.
Until we can reframe that perspective and shift the narrative around the game, that's really what we're up against. Because when I get in front of women and we have women come into our classes, they love it. They have so much fun. It doesn't take a lot to push them over to say, okay, come back and play again. But it's the stereotypes of the game that are so hard to overcome.
Yes. Yes. They're barrier after barrier after barrier that makes it so hard for us to be able to hop over. And it makes it hard because we have our own, and then to justify it on top of how we respond to everyone else. That's a lot to have to handle.
It is. Yeah. It's remarkable anybody plays, anyone who is a woman plays. Yeah. And honestly, many of them don't have children, and many of them haven't worked in traditional jobs. So it is tough.
Well, and that's important. Like as you start bringing more women into this space, that's where we get to get more information to understand those barriers, and we get to start pushing and figuring out, how do we work around those? How do we create alternatives? Like the satellite, right? Like I have never even heard of that. I didn't even know that was an option, but of course it makes sense. Like, yeah, let's figure out ways that we can recognize the talent, right? And the skill set that is being demonstrated, and let that be kind of like the buy-in, right? That's replacing it, because it's going to show and give us a good game. It'll give us, as the viewers on TV that are watching us, what we would like to see on that end. Now, of course, sorry, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say the other thing that is happening more and more is the women's events, or the ladies' events. Because many women will choose to sit at a poker table if the other 8 players are women. It just doesn't matter how you want to describe it. It is a more welcoming space. And even though your women players are very, very good players,
yes,
most women would rather sit down at a table with other women, especially when they're starting.
Yeah. Well, there's the perceived comfort that comes from it. It's one less thing, and because we've also been slightly taught to be very aware of how we present to men, right? So we do a lot more adjustment, versus with women, we're not told that we have to make those same kind of adjustments. So there might be, and there's other variables as well that we get in that freeing process. But I think that's also fascinating. Do you see that as a long-term or a short-term solution as we try to get more women into poker?
I think it's a very good solution. We have the ladies events around a lot of the bigger tournaments. I can't recall, and I've been going into real poker games now for a couple of years, ever sitting in just a regular, like a cash game. So there's cash game and tournament. What we've been talking about previously is tournament play, where you have a buy-in, you sit down and you play until you lose. The other way to play poker in a casino or a home game is a cash game, and that's probably what many of your viewers are actually familiar with. If they played cash, and you just sit down. Everybody puts so much money onto the table, and they get their chips. But when you walk by a poker room, you're not going to see a table that has 8 women at it. That just isn't going to happen. And also when you do play live, you get placed at your table. So it's not like you can say, oh, I want to sit with my 6 best friends and we're just going to have fun together. That's not how it works.
And that's part of it. Like that, there's the difference in the space, just like with any kind of activity, right? Or especially sports, right? There's difference of what we see on TV and the rules and the tone that we see there versus when we play at home, right? Like my family's game of flag football, different than, of course, what the NFL is playing. But the fundamentals, right, of what we get and how we play in that space can still apply when we watch and learn from both. Now, I really say with Poker Power, I really love that you've mentioned time and time again that you work with other organizations. Like you're not the only one here teaching poker, right? You see the opportunity to push them forward. You're collaborating with other organizations. What have been some of those that you've really said, these have been great to lean or work with? Like, I'm so glad it continues to reinforce that Poker Power has space here and is being welcomed and invested in on multiple levels.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about PokerStars first. And the reason for that is PokerStars is a global poker brand. It's very familiar. You see their names at lots of sporting events. You're going to see PokerStars branding. And they came to us 2 years ago and wanted to do a collaboration with what they called a boot camp. And a boot camp is a series of lessons that happen, on usually a weekly cadence, with the idea that you're going to go through this class, and at the end of it, you're going to play in a tournament. You're going to have, a test of what
Yeah.
you've learned.
A
And
finale.
they approached, yeah, a finale. And they approached us and said, would you be our partner? Would you be the curriculum, the teaching partner for this boot camp? And we immediately said yes to that. And the reason for that is, the first group was just, I think it was, 15, 20 women.
Yeah.
But the reason we said yes is it was exactly what is our mission. Our mission is to open this game up to people who don't think they belong at the table. And through that first boot camp that we went through, we had a final table that was created. They actually went to Prague. So if you were part of that final table, PokerStars took you to Prague and you got to play together in a tournament. It was a really big deal. It was during EPT, which is a much bigger tournament that PokerStars runs.
Yeah.
And we had professional poker players. One was Jen Shahade from our advisory board. She was there coaching the women through that final table. So we walked away from that experience saying, this was fantastic. And we got press. You always want to get press. The PR is important. And so we collaborated again. So we are currently running our second boot camp. It's 4 times the size of the first one. So we had hundreds of applications for the slots.
Wow.
This boot camp is it's European and it's Brazil and it's US. So we have a really nice international cohort going through it. And the final table, so the final top 10 are going to be playing at a PokerStars EVT tournament in Cyprus. So another fabulous trip.
Yeah.
Poker does happen in really gorgeous parts of the world typically. So that group of 10 are going to get to go to Cyprus in October and play a poker game together. And again, we're creating content around it. We are definitely, solving for our mission, which is bringing this game to women who don't know how to play.
Yes. And you're showcasing examples. That's the other thing. Like part of it in seeing like, can I do this, is when you actually look and you're like, yes, because I can see, there's a whole variety of women up there already doing this. That representation is so important to say, like, it's not just a fluke or they're just one-off sort of individual, but this is where we can belong just the same as everyone else.
Yeah. And the women who are selected to the cohort, it's done, very strategically, in that we want to have a really diverse population learning with us. Not just age and where you're from, but also what is your job? What do you do day to day? And so actually the woman who won last year, the first cohort, she's a constable or a policewoman in Canada. I think, how exciting for her. Like this is not her day job at all, to be sitting at a poker table and winning. And we have really every profession gets represented. We had a fantastic doctor was part of one. We have a couple of lawyers this time. We actually have some content people. They make content, influencers. Sorry, I'm not thinking of the right word. So we really have a diversity of backgrounds, which I think is so fascinating, because I always say that the poker table is a meritocracy when you first start learning. So it doesn't matter where you went to school, doesn't matter what your title is. The intern can beat the CEO. And that's when that power dynamic can shift like that at a poker table. It's the only place I see that happening on day one, and it can happen on day one. I can't predict how good or how bad you're going to play this game until I play you.
What a phrase. I don't think I've ever heard a phrase that would sell me more on anything. Where the intern, right? Like, because I hear it, I'm like, that's not what? Because you're right. In no other situations would you have the opportunity where an intern could come in and be able to take it. That's insane. That is insane. But you're right that there's a chance. There's always a chance in how you play and how everyone sits, that everyone there has an equal opportunity. It's how the cards are, how you're reading, how you play, so many different things, so many other variables like hierarchy that's suddenly taken out that allows us to navigate. Wow.
And we always say, the way the cards get dealt, that's the luck, but how you play them, it's all skill. And that's what we teach. We teach the skill piece. The cards are going to get dealt, and there's always going to be that luck component to it. That's what makes the game exciting. That's what makes it unpredictable. Yeah. That's what, makes you able to win or lose. So, yeah. But I do think, having a game that is communal, that is competitive, that it doesn't matter who you are or where you came from, that's the definition of equality to me. Like, everyone starts with an equal hand when they sit down with us.
Yes.
It's really important.
Hmm. Now, part of it, of course, is bringing more women to the table. As you mentioned, like diversity. How has it been trying to make sure that you're reaching a variety of women? Like, I know, of course, you're going to companies, right? And you're going from industry to industry, like you've mentioned, lawyers, right? And that space, like that is a great way. How do you continue to go in and talk to more women on various levels?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we care a lot about bringing down the barriers for poker. So not every woman works for a company that's going to hire Poker Power. I'm very aware of that. So we work with a lot of nonprofits, and we reduce our prices when we do that because I don't want the cost of entry to be so high that you get just like having a tournament you can't buy into. Poker Power shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
But secondly, we have done a lot of outreach with younger audiences in particular. So we have a program with a partner called Global Give Back, and they bring leadership skills to Africa, primarily Eastern Africa, and they bring curriculums to girls who are at risk. They're high school and university age. And their whole premise of their program is to empower these girls to give them a future that they wouldn't have had otherwise. 2 years ago, actually, almost, 2.5 years ago, they came to Poker Power, took a huge risk on us and said, would you be willing to start to teach your curriculum to our girls in Kenya? And of course, we said yes to that. That sounds fantastic. This is what we always do. I always say yes, and then we figure it out. That is truly my life motto.
Yeah.
And with this one, we had to figure out bandwidth. Bandwidth was a big issue.
Yeah.
Because
How?
you got to see me over the Zoom screen, and you've got to be able to install the app and play with us. Language barriers. Not only is poker a foreign language in English, it's really a foreign language in Swahili. So we had to work through that.
Oh gosh, where do you even begin with that?
Yeah. I mean, these were just things that we said yes before we actually figured out exactly how to deliver this. Global Give Back is a phenomenal partner with us in that one of the things they are doing is they are putting the girls through a survey program. So day one, before they have learned any poker, they answer questions on 25 different metrics of behaviors that we believe get changed through poker. So it's everything from confidence, negotiation,
Yes.
willingness to speak out loud, willingness, to ask questions. All those things can be measured. You go through the 12 weeks of poker with us and you take the survey again. So the first cohort, 23 out of 25 of the measures were positively impacted. So we were like, success. That's huge.
Yeah, these are the results we're looking for.
That's exactly what we want. Now, I will tell you this great story of a group of the girls had I think they did themselves. They built a poker table. So they got the measurements from us.
Yeah.
We sent them our logo. We made a giant sticker of our logo. They put that on the top of the table. We sent them chips. We sent them cards. And there's this most phenomenal picture of these women who are wearing their village costumes, sitting at the poker table with so much pride, so much confidence. And behind them are all the village elders.
Oh.
And you see this shift that probably has never happened in this village before, to have these young women in such a position of strength and power at that table. It's truly probably my favorite picture from Poker Power. Right, because it just sums it up. It sums up everything we're trying to do. But
they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? You see it and you're like, you see the power, you see the pride, you see the confidence that comes through in that image.
Yeah. We worked with another group in Chicago, and it's for women who have been in abusive relationships and they've left them, which takes enormous amount of courage and a lot of support and resources to be able to do. And we were thrilled to be able to do in-person poker with them. And it was very much intended to just give them a moment of success, as well as to take them out of their day-to-day stress. They're dealing with so much that is hard, to be able to come together. And we actually did it at our office in Peak 6 in Chicago, which is a beautiful space, a very special office to be in. We provide the food, the drink, made it a really special event. And so they could just come together, they could learn, they could get to know each other outside of sort of, a more stressful arena and have fun. And so those opportunities are really great for us. Because I see, I always say that the way that we're going to get to 1 million, and 1 million is our goal, it's from mother to daughter to sister to friend. That's really what it is. Now, yes, we're going to use technology. Yes, we're going to do paid ads. Yes, we're going to do all the things you have to do. But at the end of the day, it's from me to you that you want to play this game with me, and keep playing. That's the important piece.
I like that. Right. It's ultimately trying to bring it back to the relational aspect. That we're not just doing this for ourselves, but it's a chance where we get to play with one another. It's a bonding opportunity and important skills that come along with it. Right. Kind of like when you went back to this of like when it came to poker power, it wasn't like let me teach you skills that are gonna go help you in the workplace. It was let me teach you how to play.
Yeah.
That's the first part. Let me play and then we can pass that along. Teach your friend, teach your sister, teach your
Yeah.
mom. I feel like I'm ready. I want to go home and I'm like, "Mom, let's go learn how to play poker."
We can help. We know how to do this.
Yes, yes.
So you have to install the app. Everyone who's viewing has to install the app. Start there,
Okay.
because you can just start with those learning modules, and then actually one of the most popular places in our app that people are going.
Yeah.
It's not the live games that we run.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually playing against the bots.
Mm-hmm.
Our community really likes to practice. And so they will go in and you can choose how many bots you want seated at the table.
Mm-hmm.
There's no end to the game. You could play all night if you choose to play. And what's great about that is you get to practice different strategies. What happens if I raise 4 times the big blind instead of 3 times the big blind?
Mm-hmm.
How do my opponents play against me?
Yes.
So that's a really just great way to start playing the game.
I love that. Yeah, but it's testing out, getting experience, normalizing the process of like, yes, I know what this is. I know what to expect here. Like I'm starting to read situations. Now I'm ready to sit down with some others in this space. Let's go for it.
Yeah. So
Well, you tell us. We're running out of time, which is a real bummer. Um, on this end, tell us where we can learn more. I know we've, of course, in our chat, we've got the link that was pinned earlier on this end of where we can find Poker Power, but where else? Where on social
yeah,
media, all of that fun stuff.
sure.
Give us all the
So
details.
you got it. Happy to. Thank you.
Mhm.
So for social, we would love for you to follow us on social. That is how you will know about upcoming events that might be happening in your city, because not
Yeah.
everything that we do is with private companies. Often we are there and it can be open to the public. So follow us on Instagram. We're
Mhm.
on everything. We're actually on every single platform. Even the ones that got invented like a year ago, and I'm not even sure if anyone's on them anymore. We're on
Right.
them. But
Just
our
in
handle
case.
is Join Poker Power. So it's just we want you to join us. So it's Join Poker Power. So do that. You can go to our website, which is pokerpower.com. And there you can certainly read all about the mission and the vision, but you also can sign up for the virtual classes. And so that's really important. We have new classes that are starting in October. So the timing of this stream is really good. So you can start in our beginner classes. And then thirdly, it's the app. So install Poker Power Play. It's free. And you can start without anybody, but if you want to share the game, there's a way to create a game and share it. And of course, you can start playing in our games, which we'd love to see you there.
I love that. I love that. All of this is so easy. All right, friends, you heard it here. All right, you've heard the website, Instagram, get the app. Easy enough, easy peasy. And of course, if it's easier to remember, if anything, right? Especially because sometimes Friday night our brains are a little frazzled. Go to the website. Everything is linked there. That's the easiest process that you could help yourself to and start playing, right? We've got the rest of our evening. Download the app, start playing, have a little bit of fun, exploring re-entering the world of poker. I know that will be what I'm doing tonight. So that way when I go home for the holidays, I can surprise my Uncle Mike and beat him with my own quarters with this. I know I'm gonna be the quarter winner at the end of the day.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to follow up with you, Beck, and make sure you do
Yes.
that.
Yes. I'm
If
very
you need
excited
a
about
little
this.
help, we can
Yes.
help you.
The app, I'm very excited. And of course, right. And more importantly, that there's a community within this space to share, to celebrate with one another, to ask questions as we go through, remembering that when we're doing any of this, and that's why we love the gamers, that's why we love Poker Power, is that we're not going through these experiences alone. Right? We're not having to feel lost when we get those emotions of feeling insecure, uncertain, frustrated, that we have people that we can lean on, that we're not alone in this space, no matter where we happen to are, if we're playing video games or playing poker or in the workplace, that we have a community that is there to support us day in and day out, to strengthen us, to let us know who we are, the values that we bring, and to be able to leverage to get what we want in this space. I love it. I'm so excited. I know it's like night and I should be exhausted, but I'm like, I just want to go play poker now at the end of the day.
It's what I do.
It's brilliant.
It's a
Erin,
great stress reliever.
you are absolutely amazing. I know, of course, you've encouraged everyone to check out Poker Power, but you are also on a variety of social media platforms as well. I was checking out your LinkedIn page and Twitter and Instagram. So lots of options to, of course, follow and support you as well. And the many adventures that you have going on. Is there anything up on your calendar that we would want to check out anytime soon?
Well, we actually have a community event next Tuesday. So if you get
Ooh,
onto our website, click on the newsletter. You can sign up to start receiving the newsletter and you'll know about all of our community tournaments. They're, again, doesn't cost any money ever, very low risk. And you just hop into the app with us. We have a Zoom screen going with our teachers in it on Tuesday night. We do this every quarter. And it's just a great way to bring the community together and play poker. And if you want to raise your hand and say, I am a total newbie, we will help you through that. We can put a table together that just has beginners at it. So
wonderful. Erin, thank you so
yeah.
much for coming again.
Oh
You're
my
an
gosh, my
absolute
pleasure.
blast.
I'm such a big fan of GameHERs. So this has been a real thrill for me. So thank you.
We were so excited to have you on. It's so great to hear your story. And I feel like we're just getting the tip of the iceberg. There's so much to you, so much life and energy that you're bringing to Poker Power as well. So we're excited to continue to see where you go, how you influence and bring more women into this space. And we're excited to see how Poker Power transforms, of course, so many women's lives continuously. Thank you so much for coming again. Any final words to our wonderful gamers audience?
Shuffle up and deal. That's what I always say.
That's perfect. That's perfect. All right, friends, you heard it here. Shuffle up and deal. We'll see you all after the weekend on Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of Pink Pixels. We'll be continuing our influencers dives. So we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you.